right, well, thank you for attending. I'll be going over using scenario analysis to manage risk in financial services enterprise architecture. Just a little bit about Avolution. We have been in the enterprise architecture space for 19 years. We have 7 offices worldwide, and our product Abacus is used in over 100 countries and 3,000 companies. My name is Corinna Clements. I'm a senior consultant at Avolution in our EMEA region. And the Abacus toolset puts enterprise architecture at the heart of your digital business. So you can see in this slide here, we have a focus on what we call the Abacus enterprise side of things, which is really focused on reporting and bringing enterprise architecture into the rest of the enterprise, providing those analytics, providing data that is coming from different sources to all of those different consumers and stakeholders. And so that's the perspective that we're coming from when we're thinking about scenario analysis and risk management in the context of enterprise architecture and financial services. So first, let's talk about some of the accelerated priorities that we've had. Now, you can see from these charts some of the emerging trends from 2019 and 2018. So in 2019, you can see some of the hype cycle emerging trends from Gartner, looking at areas such as knowledge graphs and edge AI, as well as graph analytics. And these are trends that allow for more analysis, more awareness of the IT space. And at the same time, we have some of these other trends listed for 2018, focused on the digital workplace, focused on increased collaboration, increased digital collaboration specifically, looking at a variety of collaboration tools and a variety of things that will make moving towards a more cloud-based digital approach easier. Now, of course, these trends were at different cycles or different places in the hype cycle, some of them just emerging, some of them starting to move towards a plateau of productivity. But all of this has been accelerated by this year, where digital transformation has been forced in many ways due to the impacts of COVID-19. But of course, this has accelerated priorities that were already in place. So these include enterprise architecture and CIO priorities that were already a priority. It's just that now they've been accelerated. So these include areas such as cloud-based collaboration, enterprise architecture and cybersecurity, as well as enterprise architecture and data privacy. These top 3 priorities are all related to being able to provide stakeholders with decision support analytics, ideally through self-service enterprise architecture and IT information provision. And of course, all of these areas relate directly to managing complexity. A lot of these areas are also directly related to risk. Really, all of these are related to risk management, either in terms of needing to manage cybersecurity and data privacy risks, or in terms of needing to make sure that our decision support analytics and self-service EA allows for the tools to be provided to do proper risk management. So we'll look at the 4 stages for risk management, and that will bring into play the area of scenario analysis for risk management specifically. Now, the 4 stages for risk management are detection, containment, adaptation, and recovery. We'll go through each of those and look at some examples of visuals or reports that you can present to stakeholders in order to allow for that risk management process to take place. So the first stage is detection. Detection means integrating and centralizing company data. So that can be from a variety of sources such as Excel, Visio, and SharePoint, as well as sources such as the CMDB like ServiceNow, or a list of technologies online such as Technopedia. For this, it's important to then model these systems, pulling together technology and infrastructure, application catalogs, producing views such as application landscapes, process diagrams, and business capability maps. And by integrating data together and modeling it, we're then able to identify areas of risk. So that might look like identifying critical processes that aren't fully supported, identifying technologies that are coming to be end of life, or finding areas where highly sensitive data is being accessed by many different processes or applications. So on the side, we see an example here of a view that allows us to understand the technology architecture. So you can see the data here has been integrated together where we have data for these different views. And this allows us to see a list of technologies in this case, and that could be sourced from something such as Technopedia, where we're able to get that up-to-date information from the supplier. And this information allows us to look at these life cycles of these technologies, and then because we've modeled this fully, understand how that fits into the broader context, how these technologies support systems, how those systems support processes, and so on. So we can drill into this view, looking at more of a Gantt chart style view here, where we can see all of the life cycles of these technologies, and then also understand the associated elements, and from there associate risks based off of a technology going end of life or being unsupported, because of course we know that an unsupported technology can present vulnerabilities to us. Another example of how we can identify risks after integrating data sources and modeling those systems is presented here. So this is a dashboard focused on data security and application compliance. So you can present to your stakeholders the information about compliance so that they can make their own decisions about that. In this example, we have our application data listed, and we can focus in on those applications which are non-compliant, allowing us to see which applications have insufficient security controls for the level of security classification of the data that they access or support. And this leads clearly to the next step of identifying those risks. Here we've identified risks associated with those applications that are non-compliant so that we can then get to the next step of containment. Containment focuses our risk scoring. So it uses scoring using algorithms to focus in on which risks need to be our priority. So we can look at probability and impact and understand prioritization of those risks themselves. This allows us to plan for best and worst case scenarios. Again, algorithms come into play here. And of course, we always want to be providing real-time KPIs so that we can communicate to our stakeholders what level of containment is current. A key to containment is also understanding the impacts of a risk. So here we have a dynamic graph view that allows for risks to be explored by drilling down and seeing that that risk, for example, impacts a certain application, which then impacts many other components. So we can see the effect on departments and processes and so on. Once we've contained our risk, we then need to go on to adaptation. This requires setting out strategies for risk mitigation that includes modeling target states, comparing those target states for their resiliency, as well as tracking remediation projects using Gantt charts and using algorithms to compare metrics of different scenarios. So in this example, we're focused on a particular project that has been established in order to mitigate risk. And so we can see that this project is associated with a risk that it's mitigating, it's associated with a particular goal and strategy, and also associated with several capabilities of the enterprise. So we're clearly seeing that tie-in to the business area. In this view, we're also able to see other details of the project, including the project life cycle. So the project life cycle is shown here in the Gantt charts, but when we're looking at life cycles, it's important to not just see the lifespan of that project, but also to see how that relates to associated elements. So here we're actually seeing the associated capabilities and applications, and even the associated risks. We can see the life cycles of each of those elements and how they inform our approach for that project. Adaptation does also include scenario analysis that allows us to compare different potential outcomes. In this example, we see two different possible scenarios where we have an on-premise solution or a cloud solution, and we're able to thoroughly compare those scenarios because of the algorithms that can be run on those scenarios. So using algorithms and KPIs to make comparisons allows for objective decision making. So we can see here, this is comparing based off of a variety of factors such as availability, complexity, response time, and cost. And while that comparison might require you to make some sacrifices in other areas and get gains in other areas, it's going to be worth it to be able to make the decision that's going to be best overall for resilience. And in order to do that, in order to make that decision for resilience, it's required that stakeholders and decision makers have all information presented to them. Next, we lead into recovery. So recovery means that we're adopting processes and procedures to continually assess and mitigate risk. And we're accelerating the adoption of technologies and business models that allow for more resilience and allow for risk assessment and mitigation. And this often means diversifying and decentralizing supply chains and potentially technology so that we can consider the effects of external shocks and include risk management just at all stages of everything that we do. So an example of that is shown here. This is a disaster recovery focused view where we're really focusing in on what locations could be potentially affected by an external shock and understanding not just what is at that location, but everything that would be affected by that location in order to prioritize how we can move things around in order to have the redundancy to bounce back from an external shock. Recovery also means incorporating processes and procedures that assess and mitigate risk right from the beginning. So here you can see an example of a process that allows for risk to be assessed and mitigated right at the very beginning. So that's being built into ongoing processes rather than being something that comes in after the fact. Making these decisions to adopt processes and procedures also means that strategies and processes at a high level need to be modified. So this dashboard is focused on a process that is looking at a high level of how strategies are reviewed for resilience and risk mitigation. So we've gone through the 4 stages of risk mitigation or of risk management, and now we can talk a bit about road mapping for resilience. So we'll look at a few key points for road mapping for resilience, and then we'll move on to discuss some of the main views that are going to be helpful for stakeholders understanding a resilience approach. So here are a few key points to remember when road mapping for resilience. It's important to identify risks and then identify strategies to manage them. And that's exactly what we went over in the last 4 steps that we reviewed for the 4 steps for risk management. So that's how we can identify risks and then identify strategies to manage them. Next, we need to turn that strategy into an executable plan. So again, that's something that we did review, where we're able to, through those visuals, not only say there is a risk and we need to have some mitigation, but plan out what that mitigation will look like using Gantt charts, using projects, and planning out processes for tangible steps going forward. We also need to focus on short-term value creation and risk management. While it's important to take a long-term view, we oftentimes need to make sure that we're still remembering the short-term value creation and checking in on things that might be easy gains or easy wins at the beginning. Modularity is key for resilience. So modularity allows us to have built out platforms over time. So it's easier to make adjustments to one small subset of a system if the approach of modularity has been taken from the beginning. This also allows for projects to be rescoped if the project has been undertaken in a modular way. Resilience requires effective communication that is current, accurate, and relevant so that stakeholders are always informed and can always provide feedback and make informed decisions. And always remember that resilience and redundancy go hand in hand. So as we build out redundant systems, we're building in resilience.